Yes, the sound design situation is crazy because today we're going to be talking about crazy sound design. What I want to do in this video is just go through an empty project like this and make like one synth, but really dive deep into the craziness of sound design and just show you how to make something really complex. And I want to talk a little bit about managing the complexities of creating such sound design. So this is the kick and bass that we're going to start with. It's the same kick and bass from some other videos that I've recently made. And this is just a nice template that allows us to just draw out some interesting things. What I want to do is, of course, start off with a MIDI track and a synth. And usually when it comes to crazy sound design, what you're going to get at the start is not really what you're after. So what you generally want to do is you just want to experiment without actually an idea of what you're going to go for. And one of the tactics that I have is to use my combination tables from my tones pack. This is a really interesting starting point because it's just a collection of random wave cycles. As you can see, they don't really morph in any way. And of course, there's several different things that we can do with these. For example, one of the interesting things that you can do to make these morph is just to take a random one and then go in here and say, I don't know, take like the first 30 or something like that, and then just remove everything else and then crossfade. That way you get something that slightly morphs between them. As you can see, you kind of get a few intermediary frames, but it's still not like a collection in the way that a wavetable would be, where it's just like one nice morph. There's a lot more going on here. But that's not what I'm going to do because I'm actually going to create this patch in a way that we can basically resample it into the actual sound that we're going to use. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use Note on Random 1 here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a arpeggiator in here. And this is just going to be for the triggering. So now we have something like this. So that is already fairly interesting, but it's a little bit stale. So what I want to do is I actually want to create the setup that I've shown in the previous video and kind of recreate that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one tool that I have from the Dark Integer mod pack, which is this remapper. And what we can do is we can use an LFO to map towards that. So let's map that in here. And then let's map this to the rate. And as you can see, we get a whole bunch of different rates, but I actually just want a few of them. I want 16 notes, 8 notes, quarter notes, and 1/2 notes. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to set the depth all the way down here, and then let's set the offset all the way down, so we're at the very minimum. And then we just set this up so that we get a lowest note that we want, so that will be a 16 note. So we just take this minimum up until we find a 16 note. There we are. And that means that our lowest part now is going to be a 16 note. And then I'm just going to create another point here and I'm going to try to make this as flat as possible. And then we can set the offset up until we get to a higher point. And we already caught the 1/8 note, which is exactly what I want. So I make another point, say maybe here. Again, trying to keep this as flat as possible, but it's a little bit hard to edit in this curve. Again, we go up, see if we can get a quarter note exactly there. And then let's go up even more until we get a half note, which is going to be probably right around there. Get 1/3, so we have to edit this a little bit. Get that maybe a little bit higher. Right there to a half. And that means that now we can move through it and we can see that exactly only the notes that we actually want are being triggered here. And the cool thing is that the probability of a 16 note being triggered is this length over the length of the total graph here. And that is going to be true for all of these. So we have a slightly lower chance of getting a 16th note and a 1/2 note, and a slightly higher chance of a quarter note and a 1/8 note. And that means that we can just set this back up into a normal LFO. And now the cool thing is that we can set this to random. Let's set the rate to the lowest note that we have selected, which is a 16 note. And this means that every 16 note, we can get a random chance of either one of the 4 notes that we have selected with the remap here. Now I'm going to do quickly another thing, and that is just to duplicate over the LFO here and assign that to the gate. And then we're just going to lower this to 50% so that we don't get values over 100% for the gate length. And now we're basically generating random rhythms. You might want to make this a little bit longer. And now the cool thing is we basically have a random sounds generator. So let's write in a note. Let's lower this. already interesting, but of course there's a lot more that we can do. Let's first of all generate a little bit of stereo wave here. And let's add a bandpass filter. You could use this as a synth already, actually, if you just want to do something like this. We're basically now generating random tones, and you would design in a flow with a modulation like this, but that is not what we're going to do, at least. I am going to do that. I'm going to use my MIDI controller to record in that macro. So I'm going to go to configure here to make sure that this macro actually shows up over here. And I'll right click, edit MIDI map, and I assign my macro here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take inputs from this channel while I'm recording, and I'm just going to mess around with the macro and play until I get enough material that I can actually do something cool with that. That should be okay. Let's take this clip here and let's just extend it all the way here and here so that we have the full clip. Now I'm going to stop for a second and take a quick breath, because I wanted to give you a little bit of time to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you have a comment that you want to leave, make sure that you leave them down below, because all of those things, of course, help for the YouTube algorithm. Another thing that helps is sharing this video with some of your friends so that they get to know about my channel and they can enjoy my content as well. But with that being said, let's now recoup ourselves and let's get back into the actual sound design. And now one of the cool things that we can do with one of these resampled clips is we can just import that into a sampler and actually replay with it. So I'm going to make another MIDI track and I'm going to drag this in here. And for now, I'll just deactivate these two channels here. And let's just group this up so that we can store them away and we don't have to worry about them. One of the cool things we can do though is we can actually take this stuff over here, put that behind it, and let's take our arpeggiator over here and put that in front. And we do have to map this to the input again, map this to the gate again, and then map this over here again. And now we have our setup again. So again, we have basically a triggering setup, and we can use another MIDI clip here. This time though, we do have to trigger that in C3 in order to make sure that it's not actually pitching it around. And what I want to do now is I want to duplicate this over, and I'm going to drag this LFO over here. Let's unsync that from here. And I'm going to set this to loop mode so that this is going to loop, of course. And then we just set the length almost all the way down. Let's set the length of maybe 0.3 here, like a very, very short clip. Make sure that the snap is turned off so that it doesn't snap to zero crossings and we just are like selecting a very small portion of sound. Maybe even a smaller portion of sound here, like 0.1 would work. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like actually. And of course we can play with the starting position now. That's cool. So let's map this macro to the starting position. And the cool thing is we can group this now. And we can basically turn this into a granular synthesizer by just duplicating this over a bunch of times. And of course, you do have to make reassignments over here, I believe, because otherwise this can sometimes not work. I don't know when the cases are where it doesn't work and where it does work. But now, because we have some duplicates, we should have something a little bit more interesting. And one of the things that can be interesting in these situations is to process all of these different parts separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take modulation shaper box here, and I'm going to duplicate that over 3 times. So now we have 4 versions, and I'm just going to get random presets. That one here, I'm going to get that one, Here I'm going to get, I don't know, this one. I'm going for the glitch and those kind of categories because usually they have more complex modulations. And now we can just drag them each in their own individual part. So this is the first one, which is actually the lowest one. Okay. Let me quickly close these up because we don't really need them anymore. And now we can actually see what is going on here. We can move this one in here. And then this one in here. Already some really cool, interesting stuff. Let's add an EQ to this so that we can remove some of the lower frequencies here. And we can already hear some of the really cool rhythms starting to appear that come from some of these shaper boxes because all of their modulations are actually rhythmical. Now again, you could just use this as your synth by adding a little bit of delay. But honestly, that is a little bit boring. And one of the things that I've noticed with doing this kind of sound design is that you want to keep it dry as long as possible. Unless you're really willing to commit and you're saying like, okay, this is my synth, you're probably going to be better off having the sound completely dry. That doesn't mean no processing though. So a little bit of processing that I want to do is a little bit of dimension expander. So something like this. Maybe let's also add a little bit of stereo processing here. And of course, there's more interesting things that we can do with the stereo field by, for example, panning these alternating left and right. We do seem to get a lot more sound coming from this one, so I'm going to turn that down a little bit. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a filter to this so that we can filter it again. Say with a bandpass here. And we're getting into that category where we start to get kind of glitchy and granular and interesting in different ways. One of the things that I want to show is that you don't necessarily have to always do everything with a MIDI controller. So you can just drag and kind of write in your automations like this. And that should also result in an interesting enough sound for us to basically go to the next step, which is again going to be recording this. So we just take input from there and we record it. So that's going to be good enough. What I want to do now is I want to consolidate this like so. Again, we're going to turn this off and just put it in here so that we don't have to worry about it and we can close this up. And now this is going to be our sound source for a next potential stage. And one of the things that you may have picked up on is that it is really nice to be able to kind of divide up your complex sound design in multiple stages. I can always go back and just use this as a synth. I can always go back and just use this as a synth if I want to. I can always go back and use this file for some other type of sound design. If you divide it up in stages and you just allow yourself to have all of this stuff that you have previously created, which can be, as I said, a starting off point for the next sound design that you're going to do. Because say, for example, that you want to do something with the texture mode over here, which is a fairly popular technique. What we can do is we can use, for example, the grain size here. Let's set the grain size all the way up so that we here can draw in grain sizes like this. This isn't possible to automate, I believe, with a MIDI controller. That would have been really cool if you were able to do that, but I don't think there is a way to do that inside of Ableton. So we just have to draw something in And as you can see, I'm just kind of randomly going up and down. I don't want to go down to zero. I don't want to go down to 0% because I know that there it becomes a little bit textury and robotic. So I'm just kind of dragging this up and down, trying to not get too close to 0% where I know that the texture is not going to be what I want. And as you can imagine, through experience, I kind of know what each of the processes is going to do. And you can just kind of build on that and just kind of multiply all of the different processes until you get to something that has the complexity that you want. So for example, I know that together with the grain size, we probably want to automate or to modulate whatever this is called, the pitch as well. So going up and down in crazy ways here. Can already hear that we get something really, really cool there. I do want to get a little bit of volume back, so I'm going to OTT this. And then I'm going to use an EQ on this as well to remove lower frequencies. That's really cool, but one of the things that I want to try is a little bit of spectral gating. I believe I have the spectral stuff over here. Okay, no, I actually have to go into my plugin folder to use this. That is how little I actually use spectral plugins. But every once in a while there is something cool that you can do with it. And that is basically spectral gating. So what we're going to do is we're going to use M Spectral Dynamics, which is going to be a little bit like Soothe. You could do this with Soothe as well, I believe. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let the highest peaks through, the highest spectral stuff through. So as you can see, I'm just kind of cutting out all of the stuff below here. Let's see, try wet 100% is what we want. And maybe I don't want this effect fully. I'm just going to put this in front here. And you can see this basically almost acts like a natural kind of bandpass in that we're basically generating more of a resonant peak this way. So that's very interesting. And I'm just going to add an echo here. And again, you could actually just use that as your synth. But also, once again, we can just continue. And that is the beauty of this kind of complex sound design. And again, doing it in stages and just letting yourself experiment and really just doing whatever, is that you can just continue and decide later on which of these stages is actually the thing that you're going to use. So again, recording here. Now again, we have another file that we can work with. And again, that means that this can just go into our muted group here and just go like this, so that we can just listen to this version here. One of the things that you can do, by the way, at this point is cut out individual small parts. So let's say that you want to make a one-shot. What you can do is just take one of these, and now this is your little one-shot sound. And you add your delay or whatever other processing that you need in order to make that into a one-shot. But of course, we can also just continue and actually make some sound design and actually try to make a synth out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to load this into Faceplan's granular engine, which I think is really cool. So I'm going crop clip. That's going to work, and then load it into there. Let's see what this does. Let's give this a very long tail here. Gonna randomize the position, randomize the timing a bit, the pitch a bit, level, panning all the way, maybe some reverse, and let's give it almost the maximum amount of grains, or at least many more grains. And one of the things that I do want to do in this case is have a warm start. Unless I'm going for something like an intro effect, then it would be cool to kind of have it rise up like this. But what I want to do now is I want to have warm start so that it immediately starts at full power. I do think this is a little bit much in terms of grains, so I'm going to turn the amount of grains down a little bit. I'm also going to set the attack all the way over here, and then the release as well, like this. Maybe give it some release here as well. And we're starting to get some interesting particles. Again, what we can do is we can take, for example, this thing over here. Let's just put that there. We can just trigger 16 nodes for some instant particles. That's interesting, but again, we could just use our remapper thing that we made over here as well. Map this to there, and this to there. Let's give a little bit of OTT. One of the things that you'll notice is that you sometimes just lose a lot of volume with this experimentation, and therefore OTT can usually be helpful with that, just to boost it up to where it needs to be in order to just get it nice and loud. Nice. And say that we add our delay to this. This again can be a one shot, can be whatever you really want it to be. Either a one shot or something like a sequence. So we're just going to play this. I can play it in the root note, but I can also try maybe going a few octaves up. That could be interesting for more of a shimmer. Or maybe I want something really dark and slow. I can go a few octaves down maybe. One final thing that I want to talk about is using processors to bring it back in key. There's many different processors that you can use to take some material that is out of key and actually put it in the key. Right now this stuff is out of key, although it's not sounding off because it's very noisy. But if you consistently have notes in the sequence that are out of key, it may sound a little bit weird in the context of the actual track. So what we're going to do in this case is use the spectral resonator. And we're just going to put this right over here. And we can then tune it to the key that we want. As I said, there's many different processes that you can use to actually put something in key, but this is one of the ones that I think sounds the best. I think something like that is very cool. And as I said, you can just continue experimenting. That is the cool part of doing it this way. That is the cool part of kind of dividing it up in stages. You can basically continue adding stages up until this whole screen is filled with all of the sound design stages that you have done. And then again, theoretically, the whole cool thing is that you're going to have a whole bunch of different recordings that you can take a whole bunch of different sounds out of. Some of those recordings might be chopped up in this way. Some of those recordings might be more glitchy stuff like this. Some of those recordings might be actual sequences and whatnot. It is of course going to depend on the actual processes that you're going to use in order to do the sound design that you're doing. But this is basically the whole process. In my opinion, this is the most fun process as well. That moment where you just get to really mess around and just do whatever you want and just see wherever you go. And honestly, you may have been able to tell that this video was also kind of like that, like I didn't script it and anything like that. Because at the end of the day, with this kind of complex sound design, that isn't really possible. At the end of the day, you're trying to get to a point where you don't really know what the next stage is going to bring until you're actually working on that stage. And you are indeed just trying to find those happy little accidents where all of a sudden you find this one process where you're like, oh, that's really cool. I would have never thought of doing that way if I didn't sit down and just mess with sound design for half an hour. So really, to answer the question, how do you deal with complex, crazy sound design, is you just do it and you just let yourself go and you just don't really think about, okay, what do I want to achieve? You're just looking, as I said, for the happy little accidents, and that really just happens if you turn your brain kind of off, but not really, in the sense that at the end of the day, you still know what all of the processes maybe individually are doing, but it's just that because you know so many different processes and you don't know the combination of those processes, you don't actually know where the sound design is going to take you. Like some of these processes, obviously, I knew exactly what I was doing. For example, with all of this stuff over here, including all of the stuff that I was doing with the tone spec, this is all pretty easy for me because I've done all of this before. But some of the other stuff, like the spectral dynamics that we did right here, this one, I've never used the spectral dynamics in this way. I just knew that it had a gate option, and I wanted to check, okay, what is it going to do? And it turns out it almost kind of makes like a natural bandpass filter. Okay, I'm going to use that. And I'm just going to use that in my sound design, and then I'll move on to the next step. So that's it. That is basically all that there is to all of this crazy sound design stuff. If you enjoyed this kind of stuff and you want to see more of it, make sure that you leave a comment down below so that I know that you want this. I can actually do just maybe more like random sound design things and just try different stuff out on camera and see where that goes. The only thing that I would need to find is some catchy titles for that, so if you have suggestions for that, please also leave them in the comments down below, because of course the title is very, very important, as you may see with this one. I don't know, this is maybe a little bit of a clickbaity title, but this is the YouTube meta and I just wanted to do a little bit of a play on that, I guess. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Of course, you can support me on Patreon or by checking out my products on Gumroad, Payhip or Andrenachrom's new store. So thanks if you do. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.